The difference was night and day. And I realized it wasn't my hormones. It was that I was iron deficient.
There was a period of time where I was like, I'm just losing it. Like, I'm just not what I used to be.
And I was so annoyed. I never liked breathing. I always thought it was like, whatever. But at the end of this 16 minutes, I felt so calm.
It may seem like small stresses, but then piled on top of each other, our ability to cope with that is, definitely impaired. Welcome to the Old Chicks No Shit podcast for midlife women who are ready to rewrite the rules and create their kick-ass next chapter. I'm Jennifer Arthurton, and each episode we dive into reinvention, resilience, and unapologetic pursuit of your best chapter yet. Because midlife is not the beginning of the end, it's simply a new beginning. Let's dive in. Welcome to this episode of the Old Chicks No Shit podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Arthurton. So today we are going to be exploring the midlife nervous system. Did you know that there is actually a big shift happening in your nervous system as we enter this post-40 chapter of life? Maybe you were like me and you kind of suspected something was happening, but you couldn't quite prove it. Well, today we are going to unpack all of that. You are not crazy. Yes, big things are happening in our nervous systems at this time. And our guest today, Maryann Jacobsen, who is a registered dietitian, an author who focuses on nutrition for developmental stages, but her work lately has been focused on midlife health. And she wrote an absolutely fascinating Substack article called Meet Your New Post-40 Nervous System, which was so informative and so helpful for me personally. And I know she is going to help us all today understand this. So welcome, Maryann. I am so happy to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Jennifer. I'm really happy to be here.
So tell me a little bit about how you came to do this work and why you focus now specifically. I know you have you've authored a number of different books about nutrition at various different stages of life, but you're now really focusing most of your time on the menopause and midlife experience. Can you tell us a little bit about like what your story was and why you were focusing on this specific stage right now?
Yeah, so I had kids in 2006, but in 2009, I started my blog, Race Healthy Eaters, and I never worked with kids, and I was kind of an older mom, and I like to write and research, so I decided I'm just going to write about these different stages as my kids get older and how to feed them and the developmental changes, and that was great, and I learned a lot, but as you know, my second child, I was 3 days shy of 40 when I had him. And so I started noticing changes around 46, 47. I got really bad anxiety, and I'd had that before, so I'm prone to anxiety, but just started feeling like just a lot more irritable. And I started thinking like my kids were getting older, like maybe it's time to focus on this life stage, on midlife. And so I started, looking at the research, and I was focused a lot on hormones. And, I just became overwhelmed because there's so much out there. There's a lot of different thinking around hormones. And I assumed that these changes were because of my change. I was 47. There's got to be something going on, right? I had regular cycles.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years later, I got diagnosed with iron deficiency anemia. And it was like all the light bulbs went off. And I started, and I'm a dietitian, and I started digging in and realized that I'd been iron deficient without anemia for probably most of my 40s, which caused a lot of just that general exhaustion. Like I was okay, but I was like, at the end of the day, it was just like, I'm sure a lot of your, listeners can relate. You're just like exhausted, and you think it's because, I have kids and I have a job. But when I corrected that, which didn't take long, I mean, the difference was night and day. And I realized it wasn't my hormones. It was that I was iron deficient, but also, everything contributes. I'm sure hormonal changes too. But also what we're going to talk about, the nervous system had been changing already, and I just wasn't prepared or ready. And so as I started uncovering layers in my own experience, the research, I just started going deeper and deeper. And the book that I wanted to write in 2 years is still not written, but I'm getting there. because it really has become so much bigger than I first anticipated. And now I only focus on midlife because I think it deserves more attention. And, you know, my kids are older now. And so that's where I am now. I'm, you know, writing the book, focusing on midlife, trying to educate women and health professionals, just everyone more about this stage of life is much more than just our hormones changing. And I think right now we're a little overly focused on hormones, which is good. We need to talk about menopause, and there's a lot of great work being done. But I'm focusing more on midlife, 40 to 65, and what's really happening to our bodies, aging and menopause. Aging pause, what I call it.
Right. Aging pause. That's good. Yeah, because I mean, you talk about midlife as being a developmental stage, which I've never heard it actually referred to that way before, but you're right. It is like, there's so much shifting, right? And it's not just about hormones. Like, you know, my experience was, I went down the road of hormones and it fixed some things and it helped in some ways, but there was still a lot left to talk about on the other side of that, right? Like, it's not the panacea that I think that it's made out to be. Yes, it's an important tool in the kit that works for some people and not for others, but it's not the be all and the end all. And so understanding, you know, all the other aspects of this developmental stage is so critically important, which is like I said at the beginning, I've binged your Substack because there's so much really incredible information. So everybody listening, at the end of this show, I'm going to put the link for Maryann's Substack, because you have to go read these articles written in a really concise and easy to digest way, because a lot of this is really complicated, right?
For sure. It's a lot, but I'm like, it took me, it's almost like learning a different language. And now I'm like kind of on the other side and feel like I understand, you know, a lot more than I did.
Yeah. Yeah, because one of the books that you've written is Biomarkers for Midlife. And I want to just touch on that because, again, this was like another thing where I was like, isn't this interesting? Can you tell me a little bit about this book and why, like what it's about, why you wrote it?
Yeah, I mean, you get it. If you subscribe to my Substack, you'll get it. It's like kind of a gift book. And going back to my iron, like I didn't know how to read. You know, we all go for physicals. We should. And sometimes we wait too long, but that's fine. And I never learned really how to read all those red blood cells. So my iron, there's one measure called RDW. That's the red blood cell distribution width. And that was high for me for like 5 years. And that's a sign of either iron or B12 deficiency. And no doctor pointed it out or said, now let's check your iron, or asked me if I was a runner and I had heavy cycles, which is, so I think for women in midlife, the best place to start is check your biomarkers, go to your, where your insurance pays and see how many tests you can get there. And then you can always add on and pay to get extra. But this is basically educating women about what do these mean? What are the metabolic, biomarkers, the red blood cell biomarkers, nutrition, like vitamin D, some of the common ones. And, what are signs that you might be deficient? There's not always signs. And what do the levels mean, your thyroid too? And then if it's, you have a borderline level, you can ask your doctor for another test. So it kind of is like a script almost that you can use with your healthcare provider, because a lot of women, again, assuming it's always hormones, then this is a great place to start. Kind of check off, okay, iron's fine, everything is fine. Okay, then it's probably more likely hormonal, or it just helps you kind of figure out where you're at, and especially lipids like cholesterol and triglycerides, really understanding what they mean, being able to check if there's any insulin resistance, which is common. There's a little calculation you can do with your HDL triglyceride. And so it's a great place to start. And sometimes you can find the fix there, and you may not necessarily need to, go on hormones, or you can just kind of go to the next. But I think it's the best place to start. Like, start with the physical. The biomarker guide's pretty short, and it has you can print it out and track, or just put something on your computer, because you always want to look at, like, if I had been looking at what my levels were before, you can see trends, is it going down? Is it going up? And we can't rely on our doctors to find it. They're seeing a lot of people.
Yeah.
I'm not blaming the healthcare system, but we really have to be in charge. And, we learn how to do our taxes. We can learn, we can take some time to learn what these biomarkers mean,
Well, I think it's really important, because you're arming women with information to be able to have an informed conversation with their doctor and to be able to advocate for themselves. Because so many of us like sit in front of our GP and they run through the things, but like, I don't know, I don't fully understand everything that they're looking at. Like, I don't know what questions to ask. So this book, The Biomarkers for Midlife, again, this eye-opening. Because one of the things that happened to me, even while I was on hormones, like my cholesterol went up, my blood sugar went up, even though I live a pretty healthy lifestyle, right? Like, so it's interesting to be able to now have conversations, with my doctor about what's happening and what I can do about it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And, you want to check your thyroid, because a lot of times our thyroid dysfunction peaks in the 40s. And so that a lot of times when that happens, hypothyroid, even if it's subclinical, so it's not something they treat, that can cause cholesterol to go up. So, it's really important to kind of look at some of these, areas, because a very common complaint is like, I'm healthy, I've been doing exercising for years, and then how did this happen? And I really help women understand the shifts in their bodies so that they can hopefully find answers, because it's really, nothing's worse for me is to not know the answer, not to understand why something is happening.
Yes.
And so like finding all these hidden, like maybe your homocysteine is high, I talk about that. And that can cause, be part of the reason that you have some insulin resistance in your blood sugar. So let's make sure we're checking our homocysteine, and some doctors may not agree, but, it brings up the conversation. I think some of these biomarkers are really important because they tend to go up too, especially as women transition through menopause. And so just keeping track and being able to, find the underlying issue is, I think, important.
Yeah. For sure. For sure. Like I said, to just be even informed, to be able to have that conversation with your doctor is just so critically important. And while we could talk about those biomarkers all day, I really want to jump into and that might have to be a whole other podcast episode.
Yeah.
But I really want to jump into the nervous system, because as I was scrolling through Substack and I came across your Meet Your Post-40 Nervous System, like it immediately struck me. Because I'm 58 now, and probably since the time I was 50, I was like I'm so much more sensitive to things, like to stressors and things like that. Like my body reacts to things that it didn't used to. And I was like, yeah, there's something going on. Then I read through your article and I was like, oh my God, she literally just explained everything that I have been suspecting about what's happening in my own body. And I'm like, why have I never seen this talked about before? Like, this is such critical information, like to be able to understand that and not think that you're just going crazy. Because there was a period of time where I was like, I'm just losing it. Like, I'm just not what I used to be. But now I understand it. And that's made such a difference to like going forward, like how I think about myself, how I treat myself, like, that, self-care and stress management is now like a non-negotiable now that I understand this. Before it was kind of like, oh, if I have time. Now it's like, oh, no, this is like critical for my well-being.
Yeah.
So,
and I think
thank you for that.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the gifts. I mean, I guess it'd be nice to be able to have our old nervous system, but I think it kind of pushes us to take care of ourselves and add that to, and that's the thing, this general advice, exercise, eat right. Like when we get to midlife, we have to look at all the areas and fine tune. But basically what happens from what I found in that article, I talk about a study where I think it was like 700 men and women, 20 to 80 or something. And they looked at something called muscle sympathetic nerve activity. And so, and showed that, and that's our sympathetic, nervous system, which is the fight or flight. And then we have our parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest. Most people have heard of those. And a balanced nervous system, they work together. You go up, and then the parasympathetic kind of comes and recovers. But as we get older, we have more, sympathetic, and the parasympathetic can't quite like recover the way it used to. And this study found that from 20 to 30, actually, our parasympathetic nervous system goes up. So by 30, it's at this low point. And then after 30, it increases, I think, between 30 and 70 by 3 times. So I think this is starting to happen around 30, but we don't really feel it until our 40s, maybe sometimes 50s, because we're all a little different. It's a gradual, it's like money and an interest rate, like it accumulates slowly. So that's the whole thing with our aging changes versus menopause is more of a sudden shift, even though it happens over, a few years. The aging is just such a gradual thing. And that's why we don't always notice it. So women, we're having more sympathetic nerve activity. And that means like that the stress that we have, maybe we have the same job and the same, responsibilities, but we notice we're not recovering. Like I noticed this with my teen daughter, like we get in this fight and I'm like all upset and I hear her singing in her room. Like she got over it like that, even though she was really upset, So yeah, the singing really gets me. So we have to, there are ways that we can, not only handle our stress and set boundaries and, lighten our load where we need to, but also turn on our parasympathetic nervous system. And I personally discovered deep breathing, slow deep breathing. When I was having all this anxiety, I did a meditation on Insight Timer. And it was a 16-minute meditation for anxiety. And he had us deep breathe. It's like slow breathing the whole time. And I was so annoyed. I never liked breathing. I always thought it was like, whatever. But at the end of this 16 minutes, I felt so calm. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I started doing it all the time. And I've done a lot of research that shows that when you slow your breathing and, over like 5 to 10 minutes, so it has to be a kind of a longish time to really, for me to feel it, that it really does, turns on our parasympathetic nervous system. So that's one of the ways, we can start like really manipulate our own nervous system, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
So, there's things like that. And just in general, any self-care, taking time for ourselves, that helps turn on the parasympathetic nervous system. But really taking time to evaluate everything, your stressors, how, sometimes we don't give ourselves that opportunity to stop, right?
Yeah. And this is one of the reasons why I love this article so much. It really aligns with something that I have seen in my work and something that I know from personal experience is that we reach this time of life where anything that's really like not serving us or is misaligned with who we are or things that we have kind of tolerated throughout life, like maybe it's a career or a relationship or whatever, we reach this point where we like, okay, I literally cannot deal with this anymore and we have to make a change. And what you just articulated, in this article is that, there's actual physiological reason why we can no longer tolerate it. So, before, our sympathetic nervous system, like we could manage through it, right? Like we could just we could manage through it. Our parasympathetic would just like keep us tolerating it for a longer periods of time. And then all of a sudden when that shift in balance happens, and now all of a sudden that thing that we've been tolerating for years and years and years and years and years, it's just like, nope, not anymore. I'm making some changes. But often we get stuck in that struggle to make changes because sometimes making change is hard, right? Like it's not always easy, especially if it's big shifts in career or relationship or things like that.
Yeah. And I think there's a trend to look for like a supplement and there can be some supplements that help and hormones may help there. The studies are kind of mixed, but all the things still work and still help. If you get anxiety too, or cognitive behavioral therapy. I found a really good program called the DARE program, getting counseling and help. Like, I think women we're looking for like, oh, I need to take something, which, obviously in the case, like, I think anyone that's feeling, their nervous system revved up should, again, the biomarker guide, check your iron. And I talk about levels because a doctor may say it's normal, but there's research that shows it's very individual.
Yeah.
B12, I just talked to a woman who had a B12 deficiency, and luckily her doctor checked. She thought it was hormones. And again, when you're, these iron and B12 help to form red blood cells. And if those go low, then your heart's pumping blood quicker, and it turns on the sympathetic nervous system, that's what it does. And so it's like a double whammy. Also, if you have a history of trauma, you may find that midlife is even harder because your nervous system may already be in that, like, already be revved up, and then you're mixed with these changes and the hormonal. So you may really need to find I need to finally find a really good therapist that deals with. I always recommend looking for someone that deals with whatever, because not all therapists are trauma informed or, but sometimes it is. It's just reevaluating, like, do I want to do this work? Is it serving me the same way? And it can be really hard if, you depend on the money and but sometimes just giving yourself, you don't have to quit right now, but just giving yourself options. Like, I could do something different. I'm not going to, and just thinking outside the box. I think that's something you feel sometimes stuck in doing the same thing, but you're like, I could change it. But sometimes it just seems like it's not an option until you give yourself that option. Right.
Yeah. Well, it's so true. And, sometimes we for me, so first of all, let me just retract. Like, it can even be things like, for chronically in my lifetime, I have been under eating, right? Like, just not paying attention to food, under eating. And that was stress building up in my body, right? Which eventually, and then, going through divorce, like a whole bunch of life things, kids leaving home or whatever, I literally became I became ill. Like, I had a stress related illness because my body was now no longer coping with all of these things. It was just like stress piled on top of stress, piled on top of stress. And it was just like all the circuits blew. And I was like, okay, I can't get out of bed. I couldn't sleep anymore. And this was this is exactly explained when you were talking about the balance between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. It's like my parasympathetic just was like non-existent.
Yeah.
Right. And it literally felt to me like my body, it was like a car with a gas pedal stuck down. Like, it couldn't shut down. It just literally couldn't shut down. And I'm like, man, I wish I had understood that. Like, nobody could tell me what was happening in my body. And then I read it here on your page and I'm like, yep, that was it. Right. So
and I think
it may seem like small stresses, but then piled on top of each other, our ability to cope with that is, definitely impaired.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just so important. And one of the things, I just got, as an example, I got this Invisalign because I have these teeth that are kind of crooked and they're starting to affect my mouth, but I didn't really know what to expect. Like, when I go for these appointments, he's like, does this weird sign to make room. And I think just knowing what to expect helps so much,
right?
Because then you're not like just blindsided. And so many women are blindsided in midlife. And I remember when I was like in my early 40s and I was at the doctor, and it was a nurse practitioner. And I was like, what do I need to do? I knew I was at this stage. And she's like, you're doing it, And to me, that would be, if we could get this information and get more research, because, we don't have enough research. I'm really pulling where I can. And I'm very honest when I say, look, we need a lot more research. I'm not going to say that, everything is this is established, but I'm trying to pull together the research that we have, so that women can know what to expect. In an ideal case is when you're, in your early 40s. I mean, some women start experiencing changes in their 30s, but I think 40 is, a lot of times that's when women kind of start feeling it more. and it's really the beginning of, what we call midlife. But yeah, just knowing what to expect and then be giving some guidance on potential solutions. But then a lot of times we just find what works for us. But it's nice to know like what the options are. So yeah.
Well, and it's nice to know that you're just not going crazy, right? Because there's like a part of you that's like, you know what, like there's something like really wrong with me here. And is it in my head, right? Like, is this like, and so you start questioning your own sanity because you just don't know. And there's such a void of information, right? To tell you that like what you're experiencing is normal and that you can do this, this, and this to manage through it, right?
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, like anxiety is extremely common for the first time. I'm lucky that I had it when I was 30 because I actually saw a cardiologist when I was 30 because I would have these heart palpitations. I like thought I was having a heart attack and I had swallowing problems and I went and got a full checkup and they're like, you're fine. And that's when I learned about anxiety. And, but a lot of women don't know to expect this. And it does feel like, when you have those heart palpitations, I mean, and iron is a key. I really think I was iron deficient in my 30s too, which is just so sad that we don't check ferritin, which is the gold standard in women. So my daughter's, she's 16. I'm like, we're getting a baseline ferritin, and hers was actually pretty good, So, and that's in the biomarker guide. But women were vulnerable to, when we're menstruating. And I think it's all linked. It's, it's not just that, it's a variety of things, but there's a lot more we could do for sure. Yeah.
Do you think there's like, so I'm such a huge fan of the human body being innately wise, right? Like everything has a reason. Do you think there's an evolutionary reason for this change in the nervous system? Like why would there be? Maybe there isn't. I don't know. Maybe I'm just.
Well, we do we do start to lose some like nerve fibers. So as we age, I personally think it is, for women in particular, we always tend to put everyone else first, and we have our hormones. We're younger, have a younger body, and but then as we get older, and there's actually for menopause called the grandma hypothesis, in that, menopause is, happens so that like, then we can help take care of our grandchildren. And, but yeah, I think it's a different stage where you start putting yourself first and you're not so much of a caretaker, but, a lot of women are still in that role. So it becomes really hard, but I think that setting boundaries is, really important. And I also think I'm a big fan of listening to your body and trusting your body, but we don't know enough about, now that I know more about my midlife body, I can give it what it needs and I can, that's what it's telling me. I'm pushing it too much, and I try and, you try and tell young women that, like, my daughter is a senior in high school. I don't know. She's going to have to learn on her own. Like, you're pushing it too much. You need to like rest. And I pushed it. Like, I was like, never said no to anything forever. But I think we just don't really know. I really believe our nutrient needs change. I think a lot of things change. And, one example that shows how little we're doing is the dietary guidelines in 2020 took a life stage approach for the first time. And they had all the, childhood, that infancy, toddlerhood, adolescence, young. They included all adulthood together. There was nothing on midlife. And then at 65, it was older adults. So and I've seen this in textbooks, especially nutrition textbooks. There's nothing for midlife. They're psychological, like textbooks, they tend to talk about the middle years more. But there really is just not much. In menopause, there is more, but even that compared to pregnancy is pretty low. So, I really encourage women, figure out what does your body need and listen to it, because even if it's not good, of course, we always want to feel good, right? It's trying to tell you something, like, and that's how I look at it now. If I'm some new ache or pain, or, I just had like a little hamstring injury as running hill because I like to run, and I usually stop and walk, but I was feeling good. And I I injured it. It was okay, but then I couldn't run. And now I realize like my glutes aren't worked enough. So like I'm learning like, oh yeah, I need to like more balance my strength. It's just, I have stronger, quadriceps and weaker glutes. And that was causing my hamstrings to do too much work, and they weren't. So, I mean, that's how I always try and look at it. Yeah, it sucks when you get injured, but if you can learn that was something was missing that you weren't giving yourself, I don't know, it helps me feel better to, with each new thing that I learn about my body.
Well, I mean, you just made a very valuable point about, as women, and we're conditioned to be this way from the minute our feet hit the floor in childhood, about go, 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 do, take care of everybody and everything, and put yourself last on the list. And if you're doing that, you're like, and I'm doing this in air quotes, a good woman, right? Like you're doing all the things that you should do as a woman. So this idea that, and this is why I also loved your article so much, the idea that your body is now saying, okay, you're reaching this chapter of life, and we are now going to turn the tables a little bit. This is not about what you're doing for everybody else. And we're going to make sure that you can't, because you're going to be tired. Your ability to handle stress is going to be impaired. Like, you know what I mean? All of these things. And so now you need to slow down. And in that slowdown, maybe you can actually start taking time for yourself and thinking about what's important to you, like actually listening to yourself, to your body, to your mind, to your emotions, right? And like tuning in. And I love that physiologically, like the wisdom of our bodies is actually taking us to that place, because I really think this chapter of life requires us to show up in a very different way than we have in previous chapters, right? Like it's easy for us to get away with all of the things before because we're able to tolerate it. Now, not so much. So we have to be a little bit more choosy about where we engage, right? And a big part of that is making time for ourselves, right? Managing our stress for one thing. Yeah.
And it's like, almost like you have to, if you want to feel good, and so,
right.
And I know, like I said, everyone's like, well, because I go on these online, I'm always curious what women are saying. And there's always like, take this, do this, but sometimes it's okay. You're not feeling good and these feelings are telling you something. It's okay to just not do something and just sit with it and spend some time and figure out maybe there's a new direction. How do you, I think in my 40s, I was really like, I never set boundaries. I didn't know how to do it. And I started doing it more at home with my kids and my husband. And, I still struggle. It's not like I'm a perfect boundary setter, but I've gotten a lot better at it. And I just don't, tolerate, I've always been like the nice, just do it person. And so there's always a part of me that's afraid that everyone's going to think I'm, now this mean person, but I do it with respect, and at least I try. But yeah, I think it's such an important time. A lot of people want to feel like their old self, but you're not your old self, no matter what you do. I understand we should feel good and have energy, and we should always look at what's causing the depletion of energy. But a lot of times too, it is the stress. It's, if you're going to a job that really doesn't resonate with you anymore, that could be it. And it doesn't mean you have to quit and like be without money. It could mean you just take a class on the weekend, or and even if that's more time, if that's something that energizes you, right? Like, it might just make you feel good that you're kind of working towards something else, So yeah, I think there's many gifts in there.
Yeah, there really are. And like for me, the big one has been like learning to prioritize rest, because I can go. And then all of a sudden I'll be like, I wake up and I'm like, I'm tired from the minute I wake up. And then it's like, oh, when was the last time you like actually like just like had a rest day, like a do nothing kind of day? And then I look back and I go, oh yeah, it's been 3 weeks. Yeah. Okay. Right. But we have been taught to kind of push through that. Or like you said, is like, oh, go take something. Right. Or go get this, go get that, to fix it from outside of ourselves, when the answer is actually really inside us.
Yeah. And I also think it's a great time to like, look at the narratives like that we tell ourselves, like, I'm just not good at this. I'm just like, maybe you are like, and I'm at that point too. I'm not super organized. And like, but we can learn new things. I mean, that's really all it is you never took the time to learn. Maybe you'll never be like the best at certain things just because, but I think it's those old narratives of ourselves that we can like question, like, I don't like the gym. Well, maybe you just haven't found the right gym, or, I don't like to work out, or so I'm at that point where I'm just like, I've never loved speaking. I've gotten a lot better at it, but I joined Toastmasters because, it's once a week and it's a lot of great people there. Everyone's trying to improve themselves. And, I don't know. It's just such a great time to like, whatever that like nagging challenge you've had your whole life, like turn it on its head. And it can feel very empowering to finally like face that thing and realize that it's not that big of a deal. I don't know. I think this is a time, like, it's just a reminder too, like that we have limited time here. We're getting older, and, now's the time to do all the things you want.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Life is such a precious gift, right? Like, we don't know how long we have, right? Mm-hmm. Like, if we knew, like, would we do things differently? Maybe we would, right? But making the most of every minute and feeling good, like living a life that feels good to us is so important. And I think under like, I don't think enough people understand that it's possible for them, and it's just like, oh, well, this is my life. This is it. Well, no, you can actually make changes. And like you said, you can start with really, really small things, taking a class that you like, or, maybe shifting the terms of a relationship, or, maybe it is getting a new job. What a new career. Like, it could be any one of those things, but it's possible for us to live this chapter of our life in a way that feels really, really good to us. And a huge part of that is understanding how we work, which is like the work that you do, right? And then like listening to ourselves and taking care of ourselves. Like, we should be like number one on our list right now in this chapter.
Yeah. I mean, I've always loved working out, so that's not such a huge issue, but I would skip days. But now, like, I just don't feel as good if I don't do it, and Sunday's always a rest day. So even if it isn't going to, if I miss the early morning class that I do, it's just like, I'm going to give myself that gift of just doing a quick 20-minute, jog, or, and I do a lot of walking. But yeah, it's like, that's what I need to feel good. And, that's important to me, and it helps me be better at, everything, that I have to do. So
yeah, for sure. For sure. So what would you say if somebody's listening to this and they're like, yeah, I can really kind of feel my ability to manage stress, or, my nervous system is definitely not functioning like it should. Like, what would be the top 3 things that you would suggest somebody do to care for this new state of their nervous system?
I think, like I said, make sure you're on top of your biomarkers and that you understand and you have a good healthcare provider. Having a good doctor, I struggle with that. I finally found someone I really like. So that would be just to rule out and make sure there's no like deficiencies or anything. I think the moving your body, any way that you can, everyone's different. Some people are already working out, and looking at different avenues for that too. If you're someone that's always done a certain type of exercise, give yourself, maybe try yoga or some of the like more, contemplative, that slow you down and help you relax.
Yeah.
And then the third thing I think our breathing is so important, and some kind of breathing practice, where every day, and can be also timed to yourself. So let's say you take 10 to 15 minutes, you do some slow your breathing. There's a few different apps that can help you. Like I said, the Insight Timer, but also I have like I Breathe, which helps me do like a 4, 7, 8 breathing. But also that's time you can journal, you can, do your breathing. Some people like to do that really early, like the early morning, what's the Morning Miracle, that book?
Right.
I usually do the exercise first thing, but, just taking that time And that may lead you, if you really are feeling like this is just too much, then maybe you might need additional help from a counselor, or because some people, when they do slow down, it's just too hard for them because all these feelings come up. And so if you need the help, definitely get it. I think most people can probably figure it out, or if they're just feeling, stressed. Yeah. And that time, hopefully, with a deep breathing helps too, with a parasympathetic, but also that's listening to, yourself. Like you said, what do I want to do? Kind of that part of us that doesn't get to communicate because we're so busy all the time. We're not like listening to ourselves. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think those are like the top three. I mean, there's a lot of stuff online, people are doing somatic work. And so you can like go into it deeper. But I think just, as a really good starting place, that's a good starting place. Those three things.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I love that you talk about breath, because it's something that I've been really leaning into a lot for myself lately. Even just like for moments in time, like in the day, like catch myself and just like, take a deep breath, like really tune into my breath for like a couple of seconds at a time. Mm-hmm. But one of the things I realized, so, I've had hot flashes since the beginning of this menopausal journey. I went on HRT. It didn't really solve the hot flash issue. But what I have come to understand is that this shift in my nervous system, like when I'm out of balance in that terms of sympathetic, parasympathetic, mm-hmm. that's what causes my hot flashes. Yeah. Right. So like if I'm getting too stressed, it's also one of the indicators where I'm like, oh, I'm having more hot flashes than usual. Like it's time for me to rest. But what I also realized is that when I catch myself in the middle of a hot flash, I can actually breathe it away, which is really interesting, right? Like just taking a couple of like really, really deep breaths, or like I do the 6-3 breathing, or you can do the 4-7 or whatever. There's many different ones of it, right? But that will actually shorten and diminish the severity of any hot flash. And then I was like, one day I'm like, isn't it interesting that we actually have so much more control over these mechanisms in our bodies than we ever realize. We just have never been taught how to do it.
Yeah, there's actually research on that you can, if you start doing that, like slow your breathing and calm, that the hot flash, I mean, it's not like solid, and that's why like it's not recommended. There's not enough, but doing the slow breathing too has been shown in some studies to decrease hot flashes, if you do that on a regular basis. So it's all related, right? Like it's, hot flashes are, not everyone gets them or as severe, and they can be a sign that, like, again, a message from your body, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I know, I think that's great. And I really am a big fan of, the reason I like breathing, because there's no really risk. I mean,
right.
Like when something's so simple, it's like, okay, even if like the research is not going to show it's negative, so I really like breathing. These little things you can do, like even just like meeting your micronutrient needs. I mean, it's nothing groundbreaking, but surprisingly, a lot of women have been low on these micronutrients for years, and then it just catches up with them at midlife. And it's really simple, you can check your diet and then maybe take a supplement. That's what I look for when I find something. It really excites me when I know like there's really not much downside to this. Yes, we need the research to catch up. It's not like you're taking some unknown supplement that like never has been tested or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, I think breathing is, and there, and that this is for another podcast episode, like breathing at night, really checking, a lot of women, our airway starts to get not as open, and women can start snoring, and that can be a huge cause of fatigue. You don't have an open airway where you're breathing out of your mouth, and that's kind of causing your airway. That's actually, I read a study, it was from 2002, that like 80% of the women that had insomnia had some kind of sleep disordered breathing. And
interesting.
And that's one study a long time ago, but I think it's way more common and something for women to think about. But doing the slow breathing helps you breathe slower at night. Sometimes, at night we're breathing too heavy, and but yeah, there's lots of different things we can do that can help us Yeah. And breathing's important.
Yeah. I mean, it's free. It's readily available.
Yeah. And you can kind of do it when you're doing other things.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Especially at night, like if I get woken up by a hot flash, breathing has been like the godsend because it will actually just put me right back to sleep, which is amazing. Amazing.
Yeah. That's one of my if I wake up in the middle of the night, if I do, but it has to be like at least 5-10 minutes, like I always go back to sleep pretty much. So it made me stop fearing, I know a lot of women, like if you get up to go to the bathroom and then you're like, oh my gosh, what if I don't go back to sleep? Like knowing that you can just deep breathe, like that's part of one of the cognitive behavioral therapy for sleep is pretty common. I mean, pretty, effective. Because then we start worrying about our sleep and then that revs up our nervous system and then we can't sleep, so the deep breathing or the slow breathing, like you said, if you have a hot flash or, you can't get back to sleep is great.
Yeah. Oh, this has been an amazing conversation because I think you quoted somewhere in this article, I think it said, 67% of postmenopausal midlife women have autonomic nervous system dysfunction, according to one study. And like I said, when I came across this article, it was like the missing piece of the puzzle of something that I have always suspected, but could never quite be sure. And I'm just like, you filled in the gap with this article. So thank you for bringing this to the surface and for all of the stuff that you do, because it's so informative. Like I said, easy to digest, easy to understand. And then you also always tell us like what you can do about it. Like there's always the piece that says, oh, and you can do this, right? So we're not just going to leave you hanging with all this information. So thank you for the work that you do. And thank you for keeping us all informed. It's so important.
Thank you. It's nice to hear. And, some of these posts, like I'm just getting it out like at the last minute. I wish I could be like, have them all written. And I'm trying to, because they can be complicated, have like a summary at the end with the key points. Yes. So that's something if you're busy on time, then you can just kind of go down and maybe read it again later if you have the time. But yeah, I think, I just get so excited at simple solutions, for something that's really like affecting health and quality of life. And, these are the years we should be enjoying ourselves. We have so much to give and we've learned so much. And so we want to feel good too and be in good health. And I think it's really can be hard for women that do care about their health. And all of a sudden it's like they're having health issues and they're like, doctors like go on medication and they're like, how did this happen? So I'm pretty I'm dedicated to helping women understand because I think when you understand what's going on, then the solution is easier and all the marketing to women too. It just helps you realize, I could use that. No, that's not for me. Nothing really replaces understanding for me. And so I'm just that kind of person that I will take, if it takes a whole week to understand and do the research, I'll do it. And most people are not that crazy, but that's just, I can't rest until I know, or sometimes it's like, we just need more research. These are the things you can do for now, but let's and I am talking to researchers and I really would like, to develop a group and do more to help like push this agenda beyond just menopause and hormone therapy, which is important. But, I think we need to look broader.
Yeah. Well, because we are aging and things are changing, right? So understanding the whole picture, like the menopause is like one slice of the whole picture. Right. So when we start putting all of the pieces together and then you see the interconnections between them as well, too. Right. Like one thing over here is affecting something over here. And now, knowledge is power. So being able to make those interconnections is I think it's so important.
Yeah. And I just, I really feel sad when maybe it's an older woman and there's this post like, oh, you need to go on hormone therapy in this time. And if you don't, like your health is going to be, and they're like, oh, it's too late for me. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many things you can do, you don't, that are actually going to be more effective at your age, and so I really hope when the book's out that I can kind of be a what to expect, midlife and really it kind of works the rest of our lives because, and helps us hopefully be healthier and when we're, in the older age range. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the pendulum has just swung too far on the whole hormone replacement thing. I mean, it used to be that it was the big killer. I mean, my own doctor told me if I did it, I was going to die. But now it's come to this part that if you don't do it, you're basically throwing your health away. And I hate that fear mongering aspect of it, because for some women, it's just not an option, right? Or they don't feel good on it, right? And then we start worrying about, oh my God, if we're not doing this, now I'm doomed to a life of poor health.
Yeah. And the research just doesn't show that. Like, I mean, and when I started, I was, and I'm not saying it can't be helpful, especially when you're younger with heart disease and bone health, but especially like brain health, it's very mixed. So there's just so much, it's really complicated. And so, but it is very safe and it can be very effective. And I think all women should be, there are still cases where women are being told, no, it's going to cause breast cancer. Like there's a lot of that misinformation still. So I think all women should have the opportunity and be told the risk benefit. And no women should have to suffer through hot flashes but yeah, it's one tool, and we have lots of tools, which is great, right? Because when you have lots of tools, it's just better. You're not just in this narrow, like, this is all I can do. And if I can't do that, so yeah. And I also think that too, medication can be great for some people as our health. There's a lot of different things people can do. I have a really good article on blood pressure. Of course, always working with your healthcare provider. People don't know there's like breathing again. It's great for our blood pressure. But yeah, so I think it's options, but medication may be really great for one person. So again, we need to realize we are all very different and we all have different underlying things going on. But yeah, I agree. I think it's become, again, like, I think we just have these sound bites out there, but it's much more than all that. So.
Yeah. So where can people find out more about your work? Like your Substack for sure. I will make sure that gets a link in the show notes.
Yeah, that's the main place. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. So, people can follow me there. But yeah, my Substack every week, early Monday or Tuesday, I send out a Substack on a different topic. And, as I get closer with the book too, looking for stories, and if people want to share, I'm trying to, build more community there. So yeah, those are the main places to find me.
Okay, perfect. So we will put all of that in the show notes so people can find you. Thank you for the work that you are doing in the world. It's so valuable. Like I said, I have binged your Substack, and I will continue to, because I learn something new every time. Like every article, there's some little piece of the puzzle that I pick up, which is so helpful for me, for the little nerd brain parts of me that just like need to know.
Yeah.
But I just feel like this information needs to be disseminated. So when you write the book, definitely you have to come back, because we need to.
Yeah, I would love that. Oh, I was just thinking of that. Like I gotta, get it out there. And, so yeah, I would love to do that. And there's so many different topics. And next week I'm going to be talking about hydration, how that changes. So that's something I've learned the hard way. Things happen to me, and then, I can share it because, I'm right there in the stage too. So.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And to those of you listening, if you like what you heard today, first of all, go follow Maryann's Substack. The link is in the show notes. And B, rate and review this episode. And C, pass this along to your friends or any of your midlife friends, relatives, anything, because this is the information that we all need to know. So thank you, Maryann.
Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Old Chicks No Shit podcast. If you like what you heard, the greatest compliment you could give us would be to comment below and subscribe. Or better yet, you could share this episode with a friend, a relative, or somebody you think could get something out of it. And remember, midlife is not the beginning of the end. It's simply the beginning of your kick-ass next chapter.